Topping Talks. 105 hours a week, can't be beat. Welcome to Topping Talks. Topping Talks is a Topping Tribune production, and today's episode is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies and ExpressVPN. Topping Talks is also on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in IT security. Heck, I see their founder at least twice a day. Have to say he's quite handsome and brilliant. If you're a business in Texas that can use a hand, you can reach us at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, are you part of the 3.6% of Americans who still care about their privacy? If you are, then perfect. ExpressVPN can assist. Even though 96% of stats are made up on the spot, ExpressVPN does give a 100% guarantee via their 30-day back money guarantee. Now, without further ado, I'm proud to say today I'm interviewing Alan Lowrance, who's the IT Service Process Manager at Denbury Resources.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on the show, bud. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
I know it's been a lifetime, but what was that first itch or was that first thing to get you into IT?
Oh, man. It was a long, long time ago. I was probably 7 or 8 years old in elementary school, and the computer lab lady, she wanted someone to go around and turn on all the machines throughout the whole building and the labs. And these were old, like, Power Macs or maybe even Apple IIes.
Two Apple IIs?
Yeah, I remember the blue background and the white text. And yeah. So I would get there early and boot up all the machines, and just the little quirks of like, oh, why isn't this one booting up, and why aren't the printers working, and that kind of stuff got my wheels turning. This is kind of fun, and my teachers, if they ever had issues and they didn't want to wait for the tech person to come, they'd be like, hey, Alan, take a look at this, even when I was, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I guess growing up with that, I played a lot of computer games.
What was your favorite?
Man, Red Alert.
Oh, really? What was that?
Yeah, Command & Conquer, Red Alert.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And then like the Age of Empires games and stuff like that.
Legendary. Do you remember Age of Empires 2?
Yeah.
That was half the LAN parties I had growing up as a kiddo.
Yeah. And Age of Mythology.
Yep.
That was just fun.
I think Age of Empires. Yeah. What was your favorite Age of Empires?
Probably 2 had an expansion that was really good.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, with like the Native American tribes and stuff. I think that one was cool.
That was my favorite. That was the one we all had growing up. So we got the Age of Empires 2 originally when we all got our laptops for college. You have all the little LAN parties and stuff.
Yeah.
Then we got the expansion shortly after.
And I remember having to dial in to my friends and would do like networked games.
Oh, cool.
But we would use like my fax line. So you had to like dial into their IP address to have, before there was like BattleNet and all those things. You'd have to like dial in, and that was fun. And then, I would always get like the hand-me-down computers from my dad. And when I was 13, I was like, I'm sick of having, the old Windows 3.1 or whatever. Like, I want a Windows 95 or Windows 98 at the time, I think it was. So I remember going to Fry's and just piecing it all together and building, using all my allowance for the whole summer, basically, to like scrap together something.
Oh, yeah. That store was the best.
Yeah.
They had everything.
It did. Yeah, you could even get like washer and dryer and,
and
a power supply for your computer. Like,
right? Literally, you got to play where it was literally everything. I mean, I grew up where a lot of my friends now would go there for the airsoft guns and then all the old Xbox supplies for all of that.
Yeah. One of the funny stories about like getting into the software aspect and software troubleshooting was my dad would put this like nanny software, like web filter on the computer so I couldn't go to bad sites and stuff. And so I learned how to reinstall Windows because it was a password protection uninstall. So you couldn't uninstall it without the password. And so my solution was, I have all the Windows 95 disks or floppies or whatever it was at the time. And I would be able to do that before he would get home from work. And he wouldn't notice for a little while. And then, every couple of weeks, he's like, "Oh, why isn't this software on here? What's going on?" And he'd reinstall it, and then I'd have to reinstall everything else again. And then I guess in high school was the turning point where I was like, "Hey, this could be a career with programming." Mm. I don't do much programming in my day to day. I do a little bit of JavaScripting, but in high school, it was a Java class, and it was an elective, and it was really fun. I remember, I hated math, but I liked looking at things in steps and breaking, a problem down into, the 8 math functions that had to happen to get you the answer.
Yeah.
And then letting the computer do it, so I didn't have to do it. So I think programming was really where I was like, hey, I know if you're trying to find something and you need to loop through certain iterations until you get the answer, this is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's got to be, I can't imagine the satisfaction of building one of those programs from scratch, too. That's way beyond my pay grade.
Well, I went to UT Arlington for computer science.
Oh, really?
But after one semester there, I was like, this is expensive. It's not very fun. They're making you build all your own programming libraries and not just call ones that are already there.
Really?
And the compiler had all the shortcuts turned off and wouldn't do the syntax highlighting, so it wouldn't tell you if you missed a curly bracket or a parenthesis somewhere. It just wouldn't run, and it wouldn't even say what line is the issue, because they wanted to hammer it into you of you need to know how to catch all these things yourself and not to rely on the software to do it.
Oh, jeez.
But that was so infuriating to me. Is I want to build something.
Yeah.
I want to make something that makes someone's lives easier, or something that a business would use, not sit there and count my parentheses.
Yeah, it's almost as crazy as saying to someone, you can only visit this website that's 5 or 10 words long, but you have to type in the URL manually and make sure every single thing is right.
Yeah.
Instead of just going to.
Well, and our tests were handwritten.
What?
Yeah, they would give us a sheet of paper and a pencil, and we had to do the indentions and write the code out.
What?
Yeah.
How unrealistic or unapplicable is that to the real world?
And then I looked and saw how much math to get the degree was, because it was in the engineering school. Mm-hmm. It was going to go through calculus 3.
Oh, geez.
And I'm I'm not going to program the Mars rover.
Yeah.
I want to make something that helps someone's spreadsheet do something better.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided, I was oh, there's programming in the business school called MIS. And that's a lot better than actual software engineering.
Yeah. A little bit closer to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then how do you get your first role in IT?
That was a funny story. So after UT Arlington, I didn't really know what I wanted to. This was before I knew about the business school thing. I just went to community college, got my associates.
Oh, nice.
And was just going to figure it out from there.
Yeah.
And the summer I graduated with my associates, I saw a Craigslist ad of just looking for a recent college grad with who's good with computers and good at troubleshooting and can be hands off and figure stuff out on their own.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. So I called the guy, and he was a headhunter for an oil and gas company in downtown Fort Worth.
Really?
But he didn't tell me any of this. He's like, hey, let's meet at this Mexican restaurant. And he just kind of I guess we just had a conversation.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, you seem bright enough. You can figure it out. You'll have an interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. at this address.
Yeah.
And it was a big building. And I couldn't really figure out what company it was going to be for or anything. I was like, okay, this is a big skyscraper. They said the 14th floor, but I don't really know. So even going into it, I had no idea what this company did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was oil and gas. And it started out just, fixing printers, replacing toner. Hey, why isn't my mouse working? Oh, your batteries are dead.
Yeah.
I had level 0 troubleshooting.
Yeah.
And then they got me more into documenting all the steps and, hey, we have a new piece of software. Can you show the screenshots of how to install this like one by one, so I would make all the documentation, disaster recovery documentation too, of like, here's, you know, all the passwords to things, and
what was that
lock
like?
it up in the safe.
What was it like when you first started? Was that, you know, good old tape backup, or what was the backup process like?
Yeah, tape backups, and it was a pretty small company. I think it was about 250 people, and so there were only 3 IT people and then a director. And so we did a little bit of everything. Like, I was the only help desk that only did help desk. The other guys were kind of sysadmins, networking. They did kind of everything.
So one person for help desk for over 200, 200 plus people.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
and
a lot.
A lot of the times the answer was just, okay, re-image it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that we used Norton Ghost.
Oh, really?
To lay down the images.
Yeah.
So this is like way before SCCM and stuff. It was a learning experience for sure. And then that company got bought by my current company, and moved here to Plano. I was a contractor at the time. It was funny. It was a 6-month contract when I started at the first place, Encore. But at the end of the 6 months, they were actively like trying to be sold.
Oh, really?
That was the plan. Is like, we just need to like buy all these assets, prove that, you know, there is oil there, and then try and get sold to somebody. And so at the end of my 6-month contract, they were like, okay, well, we're being bid on by Anadarko and Chevron and like all these other companies.
Yeah.
And we can't bring on new headcount because all of our finances
are frozen, basically.
Yeah, like they're like documenting like, this is what our G&A is. So they just kept extending it and going month to month for 3 years. So
oh my gosh,
I was a contractor for, I think it was like 34 months or something.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then Encore, or when Denbury bought us, it was the first thing they did was bring on all the contractors that they.
Oh, that's awesome.
Worthy. So yeah.
Probably literally the best success story I've ever heard from Craigslist, like ever.
Yes. And I was still just on the help desk then, but we were in the process of switching our ticketing system from Numara Trackit, because I guess BMC had bought them, and they were like, hey, you either need to go to Footprint or we can go to some other competitor. And at the time, ServiceNow was still a startup. They just went public. They were very cheap. I think their company was smaller than Denbury was.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I think their market cap was like $1.5 billion, and we were like 3 or 4. And we're like, hey, this is great.
That's quite some time ago. So they were a startup and they were cheap.
Yeah.
ServiceNow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And they like sold themselves as like, hey, we're a cloud database that you can program to do whatever you want, and we just happen to make a ticketing platform out of it as a proof of concept to sell to people. Yeah. But you can make it do whatever you want. It's just tables and records, and you can write scripts that like, when a new record is added on this table to do X, Y, and Z. And it was all JavaScript, and I already knew Java.
Oh, perfect.
And I was like, hey, I can customize this thing to do anything. We can, you know, digitize all these workflows that are just email processes right now.
Save a lot of time.
And so that's where I started getting promoted a lot in the company, is because I was on the help desk, but I knew some programming. I knew the IT ticketing system, so I helped implement all of that for Denbury. And then other departments throughout Denbury came to me and saying, hey, we have a shared mailbox for accounts payable. Yeah. That, hey, someone needs to be paid, and they just email, you know, something at denbury.com, and it would go to a shared mailbox, but nobody knew who was working what the status of it was. If someone went on vacation or maternity leave, they just wouldn't reply for months. And they're like, we need something like tangible, who's doing what and what state is it in.
Nothing gets slipped through the cracks, or vendors like, it's been.
And so I pointed that email box to just create records on another table for them. Yeah. And now they're ticketing, and we did that for
That's brilliant.
6 or 7 departments.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why it's funny, like my title is a service process manager, because I'm not just the help desk manager or the asset manager. I also like help digitize a lot of the workflows in ServiceNow for the whole company.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That made a lot of lives easier.
Yeah. And then it's funny because they would get like halfway through implementing, and I would show them like how you can report on it and make pie charts and trend things over time of seeing who's working what or how long it takes to solve which type of request, and it would just blow their minds. And in IT, it didn't make like, oh, we've been using this for decades, but other parts of the business, and especially oil and gas, they're a lot slower to pick this kind of stuff up. Just the fact that they could see, hey, this time last year was busy. This time next year might be busy, and they can like hire a contractor and adjust for it. They never knew the seasonality.
Oh, really?
Always just keeping their head above the water. Yeah, and never could see the trees before the forest, or whatever the saying is.
Oh, yeah. That's huge, because I know contracting is a really big part of oil industry.
Yeah,
because there's so much fluctuations. A lot of people don't realize all the physical as well as human investments if you're going to like go explore a new drill site.
Yeah.
And if it's, once you prove it exists, well, then you got to ramp up quick. And a lot of times, contractors are a great way to do that.
Yeah. And it's a very boom or bust industry. And it's almost every 7 to 8 years, you'll like have a lot of money all of a sudden. And then you can barely sell the oil for a profit. You're just breaking even.
Or lose. Yeah. Because I remember when COVID first hit, like the U.S. government, they had the opportunity to buy oil from buy crude oil barrels from the oil companies for like $23 a barrel. And everyone's like, that's too expensive. That's just a handout to the oil industry. And now, what's it up to now? Like 100, 120? It
hit like a little over 100. I think it's like 80 something now.
Yeah. So it's like, we could have gotten it for $26 a barrel.
Well,
but,
and
gosh.
It's frustrating working with IT vendors, because every single year they want, especially cloud, they want 8 to 10% or 12% increase every year, regardless. And we're like, well, oil hasn't been going up that much. We haven't drilled 8% more wells.
Exactly.
We're declining. After you have 50 wells, every year you're getting less and less and less from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're drilling more.
Yeah.
And they're just not set up for that. We're like, we can't just come out with oil 2.0.
Yeah.
Put a lot of money in R&D and all of a sudden have a new product.
Yeah.
We're just at the whim of the market.
Yeah. And it's a global market too. A lot of people don't realize how all the prices are set and all the supply chain is manipulated and controlled.
OPEC can decide one thing.
Yep.
And screw us over, or we're jumping for joy and having lobster tonight.
Nobody knows. Exactly. It's just there's so many variables in that industry, and a lot of people don't realize all the processes that have to go into actually getting the fuel to the point where you can put it in your vehicle.
Yeah. Well, and it's so different from like the startup mentality of. I know a lot of new companies will just go on Amazon and get all their servers.
Oh, yeah, AWS.
They'll do operating expenses. But we can't do operating expenses because that gets calculated into cost per barrel.
Oh, really?
And so it messes up our whole economics of like, how much did this barrel of oil take to get out of the ground? But if we do CapEx, it's a one-time, it gets written off. They're like, hey, it's not a reoccurring expense. So it doesn't get, intertwined with every barrel of oil.
That'd be so hard, especially I've yet to meet the person who could accurately predict what your cloud bill is going to be month to month.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine trying to calculate that and take into account, build that into the cost of the barrel. And then when do you calculate? Is it once the fluid is put into the barrel? Is that when it gets expensed, or is it after? Or?
Well, and
it's so hard.
Kind of a misnomer because they don't actually put them in barrels, but they just measure them in barrels. Usually they're in pipelines or trucks or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's just a unit of...
I think it's like...
More often than not, it's just a unit of measurement.
It's like 55 gallons or something around there.
Yeah.
And then based on the density, like how much water is it versus how much oil is it, that could change. So it might be 100 gallons of liquid, but it's only 1 barrel of oil in there.
Exactly. A lot of people forget, like all things like lithium or gold, you need to get a lot more material to get down to the actual refined product.
Yeah.
It's like you need, so many tons of ore to actually make 1 good pound of copper, lithium, gold, what have you.
Yeah.
But it's not a 1-to-1. It'd be magically awesome if it was a 1-to-1 ratio, but
Yes,
it's
I
far
think that's
from.
what a lot of people don't understand, why oil and gas has been so slow into getting into the cloud and software as a service and everything, because we don't want it to hurt the price per barrel.
Well, no one wants it to go up.
Yeah.
I mean,
And because you're graded, like all the analysts at the investment banks look at you and say like, hey, you're an expensive oil and gas company if it costs you $40 a barrel to get it out of the ground.
Yeah.
Where they're going to invest in someone that's $18 a barrel instead.
It's much more profitable. Yeah.
But who knows if that $18 a barrel company is just overspending CapEx all the time.
That's true.
If it's cloud, you can flex up and flex down so much easier, but they don't have a monetary value to that. So.
Yeah. That'd be a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And then what's the biggest challenge that you've seen lately?
Lately growth, because I know in the 80s I heard that the whole peak oil fear was going to happen, and so there was no new engineers.
Was that when they were worried that there was not going to be any more oil? Or
Yeah, they were worried they were going to run out of oil.
Oh yeah, I hear every 10 years you get that
Yeah,
warning.
but technology has always made it so you can extract more.
Yeah, like fracking.
So, yeah,
That was revolutionary.
and that's what our company does. It's called tertiary recovery. So after when you just make the first puncture and the oil just comes out as it equalizes pressure, that's primary. And then secondary is when they inject water in and get oil out through displacement of the oil in the water. And then ours is we get CO2 from, a lot of the times, anthropogenic sources like natural gas fired power plants.
Oh really?
And we scrub the CO2 off the smokestacks and pump it through a pipeline, inject it into the ground, keep it there.
Yeah.
So it's negative carbon footprint.
That's
even
awesome.
the oil we get out when it's burned is less than the straight pure carbon dioxide we're putting in.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
And there's a lot of
brilliant.
tax credits now
Oh really?
that are helping with that.
How's that work out?
So that bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that just got passed a few months ago, it doubled the tax credit per ton of CO2. It used to be, I think, $35 per ton if you used it in oil and gas production. If you did straight, like putting it in the ground, not getting anything out, just for sequestration is what it's called, they would give you $55 per ton.
So what is sequestration, or what was that?
Sequestration is just like using the underground reservoir as a vault.
Oh really?
And just putting
product in
gas
there? Or?
down in there,
Oh okay.
CO2, and not getting anything out. But if you put it in and get oil or natural gas out as a byproduct, they want to penalize you a little bit, so they only give you $35 for that.
They want to penalize you for being productive?
Well, because then you're going to also make money on the oil or the whatever. So they don't want to give you more tax and you get a product you can go off and sell.
Sounds like a win-win.
It is. And a lot of the times it makes more sense to do that. But there's some reservoirs that don't have any oil or gas left. So we just use those for sequestration. But
Interesting.
with that new act that was just passed, it almost doubled everything. So I think it's like $80 or $90 per ton for oil and gas use, and 120 or somewhere in the hundreds for sequestration. So that's a whole different business model.
Yeah.
We have our traditional oil and gas company, and then we have a whole new department that's started from zero and now 50 or 60 employees.
Really?
That's just CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
Really? So in layman's terms, depending on how you store it, you get money back from the government or credits off your taxes?
From the source, so like the natural gas power plant, for every ton of CO2 they don't
Right.
release into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
They would get a tax credit for that 100 or 80 bucks, but they would need to pay us to get rid of it safely and go put it somewhere. So we get a fraction of that, but for keeping it out of the air, and if we can use it to get more oil out of the ground, it's a win-win. We used to have to pay them for the CO2.
Really?
Now they get to pay us for the CO2.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so I think that's our biggest challenge is just we went through a bankruptcy in 2021 with oil price when it cratered.
Yeah.
And, we were way in debt. We had over $2 billion in debt.
Oh, wow.
And through the bankruptcy and restructuring, we were able to get rid of all that debt.
Excellent.
And then luckily everything turned around too. Just timed it well. And so now going from back to back to back layoffs before the bankruptcy, I think we were only 1/3 the size that we were in 2015. And now we've had to almost double in a year or two.
Oh, wow.
And so that's been the biggest challenge for the help desk to keep on top of, and servers. And also 2015 is when oil crashed from 90 down to 30 a barrel. And so we had all those layoffs, but we also weren't purchasing any new servers or laptops or desktops. Everything was on hold.
Yeah.
And so we were making do with 6, 7, 8-year-old machines.
Oh, wow.
Until this last year, then we're okay, we have budget finally. We can upgrade all this stuff. And at the same time, we're we also need to increase our cybersecurity because the whole Colonial pipeline.
Yeah, that's big awakening.
That lit a fire under every oil and gas company. We can't let that happen to us.
Yeah.
So you invest heavily in cybersecurity. We have a whole cybersecurity team that went from 0 to I think 3 or 4 people now.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So it's just been, it's been fun, but it's been crazy.
Good challenge.
Yeah.
It seems like of all sectors that's considered, essential business, I'm guessing you guys were in the office working through COVID to make sure.
Yeah. It was funny. We had a letter from our CEO that we could show to a police officer if we got pulled over during the depths of COVID when nobody was able to travel. They're just show this and you should be able to go to work.
Yeah. It's things will get a lot worse if people can't heat their homes or get electricity to their houses.
Yeah.
That's not going to be good. And then what's your favorite part of working at the company?
I like that it's pretty scrappy in terms of manpower in IT. Like I said, that company, there's 250 employees, only 3 IT guys. It's kind of the same where we were at our biggest, I think the company was around 1,800, and we only had 11
That's
IT guys.
Oh my gosh.
in the infrastructure and support side. We have a lot of SAP developers and database guys and stuff like that. But in the infrastructure side, we only had 11 or 12.
Oh my gosh.
And that's also including all of our field sites and everything. So we had 2 or 3 guys out in the field.
Yeah.
And the other, 10 or so here in the office.
Oh my gosh.
And I think we've got something like 30 to 40 field locations. Some of them are just a trailer with 2 desktops and 5 guys that rotate out, but some of them are 60 or 70 people there.
Oh my gosh. And this was without a contract for a managed service or a external help desk assistance?
We tried a 1-800 number help desk company back in 2013, 2014, and we just have such weird old software that they couldn't support it well.
Oh, really?
A lot of our homegrown applications for oil and gas accounting or landowner royalty payments and stuff like that is just so niche that you can't just pull an IT company off the shelf and say like, hey, can you help support
this app
thing?
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. You guys done a lot of internal development.
Sometimes, yeah. We have a team of 2 or 3 database engineers that also do a little bit of coding, and they've built some apps that will help bring in different sources of, oil production and standardize them and send out daily or weekly reports to let us know, how much oil is being made.
And then out of curiosity, how's that work with the property rights or when you're working with the property owners?
Yeah, and the property owner whole thing is interesting. We have, we don't really have customers.
Really?
We have, we sell all of our oil to pipelines at the time that they take it. And so, the whole company might only work with 6, refineries and pipelines or something like that. And it don't quote me on it, but it's probably not exactly 6, but, but it's business to business.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have to worry about
you don't own the
customer
gas
credit
stations.
cards
Yeah.
and point of sale systems and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the only time we do interface with just average humans are the royalty owners. So the people that own the land above where we're getting oil out of the ground. And sometimes those are handed down for generations, and, great-great-grandchildren of this ranch that they don't even own anymore, but they kept the rights.
Really?
And they're getting like 1/128th of the royalty payment.
Yeah.
Because it's been split so many times since then. And
Really?
if the check doesn't show up or they don't think it's the right amount or whatever, they call our little hotline.
Oh, yeah.
We have a whole team of owner relations people that,
really?
that just deal with all that.
One of my friends was buying a house, and he was explaining to me the importance of owning the mineral rights. A lot of people don't realize if you buy a plot of land in the U.S., you might own that plot. You can build a house there, you can own the land, but if you find, gold or, even like oil well over there, that's not yours. That's someone owns the rights to that actual asset, kind of like the sky.
It's harder now. I think a lot of the times the developers that develop the neighborhoods keep the mineral rights. And they'll pass it on, and then they sell it to banks and investment companies and all this kind of stuff. So it's more rare that just an individual will have the rights.
Yeah. Gosh dang, that'd be nice to have, right?
I mean, sometimes it's only $80 or $40 or something, but it's passive.
Exactly.
Forever.
Just, I mean, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to read the fine print if I ever had the privilege of buying a ranch or house. Be like, where's the mineral rights?
Yeah.
Do I get that? Or do they, or would owning the mineral rights double the price of the land or the cost? I don't know.
It depends, yeah. Especially with CCUS, injecting CO2 into those reservoirs under people's houses, they'll get money for each ton
Really?
you put under there. Yeah.
So I guess in layman's terms, that's a safe way to store it. So they're taking the CO2, they're pumping into underground reservoirs, so it can kind of stay there.
Because these reservoirs have held natural gas and oil for millions of years without leaking. So they're airtight, 2-3 miles under the surface.
Oh, wow.
And so we can use them to hold the CO2 and just make sure to seal it up real well, and there's nothing stopping it from lasting another few million years.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a great way to reuse that land area. I never thought of that. That's a brilliant idea right there.
And it's stuff like, you don't think about how big some of those reservoirs are, but they're in the millions of cubic feet.
Millions?
And some of them, we have our CO2 source that we have been using for a long time before we started doing the industrial CO2. There's naturally occurring like underground volcanoes that we bought the mineral rights to use the CO2 from that underground volcano.
What?
And it had like 2 trillion cubic feet.
Where was it? And this is in America.
In Mississippi, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Underground volcanoes?
Yeah. And that's always been scary when I hear like, oh, we're gonna drill another well to get more CO2 from this underground
volcano. Yeah.
Like, let's poke a hole in it.
I wouldn't have placed any money on, are there underground volcanoes in America? I would have never guessed that.
Yeah. Yeah, all the geology is crazy. I remember when I was at Tarrant County College, getting my associate's summer that I did an elective geology trip because I needed, I think it was 9 credits or 8 credits or some weird amount to graduate.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, for 15 days in your summer, we're going to go on a road trip around the Colorado Basin, like New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and back. And every single night you're going to be pitching your tent, sleeping on the ground, and we're going to show you all the geology of the Colorado Basin.
Oh, cool.
And so we had a geologist as our teacher, and I think that really sparked my interest in like, hey, a lot of geologists go into it wanting to study the Earth and study planets. I know in the 60s they had a lot of geologists come in because they wanted to work on the moon missions.
Oh, really?
And then when we stopped going to the moon, all those geologists had to get jobs in oil and gas companies. And
Really?
so a lot of them were kind of shaded or jaded.
Yeah. So they want to go to the moon.
Yeah, they wanted to like study planets
Yeah.
at the macro level,
Yeah.
and not like get fossil fuels out of this hole in the
Out of-
ground.
yeah, this hole, this like this hole in this state, this location,
Yeah.
or go to the moon.
Yeah.
Which that's a shame. We just once we got there, like, we're good.
Yeah. Oh, and then to loop back, something I had alluded to earlier, like in the 80s, a lot of students weren't going into petroleum engineering and chemical engineering
Really?
because they thought peak oil was going to happen.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they'd be out of a job. And like, why get a degree in petroleum engineering
If it's not going to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was this, like, they called it like the lost generation of like petroleum engineers because in the 90s, 2000s, 2010, there weren't enough. And so you, in 2005, 6, 7, you started to see a lot more pick up after fracking and all that.
That was probably,
Yeah.
was that probably, is it safe to say that was the biggest technological advancement in the industry in our lifetime?
It's definitely one of them because it flipped the whole script of
Yep.
peak oil no longer being a supply issue and being a demand issue.
And I guess for the layman's terms, what is fracking for folks that aren't in the industry or may have only heard of the term on the news?
I'm not
Just in layman's terms,
Yeah.
just conceptually.
From my understanding, it's where you'll drill into. So traditional oil was in big pockets of pretty open, like just think of it as like a big cylinder shape or a big kind of round oval shape.
Big tube, yeah.
Yeah. And you just need to go in and you slurp all the oil out. But all those are basically used up and gone. There's no more of those in the world.
Even in the Middle East, or is it?
Yeah, because I think the Middle East is who developed fracking.
Really?
So, and it's kind of hard to know that, they don't audit their reservoirs
Yeah.
the same way we audit the reservoirs. They just say, hey, we have 10, 12 more years of oil.
Yeah.
But they don't tell you like how intensive or how hard it would be to get that oil out. But yeah, so all those easy reservoirs have been used, and the ones that are left are like these thin little, maybe a couple inches tall, but stacked, 90 or 100 deep, but there's little rock layers in between each one.
Really?
And they go for miles. And so it's still thousands or tens of thousands or millions of barrels of oil, but they're in these little 3 or 4 inch or 8
Little
inch
pockets.
strips.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so fracking, you drill down into those and then use hydraulic fracturing to make cracks in all of those thin separator rocks.
And hydraulic fracturing, is that when they just inject the goo, or they use the force of the liquid hitting the rock to break the rock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like they drill down there and then they use mud and some kind of like detergent sometimes to keep things from sticking, and they like force a pressure to crack all of the thin layers of rock, and then they can slurp up the oil.
Yeah.
So I think that helped flip the script of, hey, one day we're going to not run out of oil, but we will no longer need oil.
Yeah.
Except for some plastics and stuff like that. But even then, they've found ways to make plastic out of CO2,
Really?
reconstituting it with like some minerals and like making some kind of oily
Oil
byproduct.
substitute?
Yeah.
Really? That's fascinating.
It's not profitable right now.
Not yet. Yeah, that's the issue with a lot of those. They say they're green technologies, but I debate if they truly are green when you look at like especially solar panels. So California had a big issue recently where you buy these solar panels and a lot of folks don't realize they're not made of magic pixie dust. They have a lot of corrosive and hazardous materials in it, including I think they have mercury. Then you have the safe stuff like copper, aluminum.
Yeah.
But once that solar panel is dead, because they do like everything in life, they eventually stop working.
Yeah.
How do you recycle the darn things? So there's an article a couple weeks ago. They were saying if you recycle this solar panel, you'll receive maybe $2 in aluminum, copper, or the equivalent $2 in most expensive materials.
Silver. Yeah.
Exactly. However, the price to environmentally safely recycle that panel is like $48.
Wow.
So right now they're trying to figure out, well, what technology or steps does it take to make it so that the cost to properly dispose of it and take it apart is maybe 50 cents or a dollar. So it's a fiscal win to recycle, kind of like IT hardware, where sometimes it's profitable because of the mineral, or I was going to say minerals, the materials of the actual hardware, and or other companies might reuse it based on legacy apps. But I know GE just laid off another couple hundred employees from their windmill. Windmill department in their company, and it's just because those things are
Turbines.
The turbines. It's just one of those things where the ROI is like 25 years.
Yeah.
So it's a terrible fiscal investment, and the big issue there is how do you generate the power? It's not doing that efficiently enough with the current technology, but then how do you store it? I think those will all be solved in our lifetime, but you need a technological breakthrough to make it profitable.
Yeah, I know.
Then you'll have mass adoption.
One of the big future moonshots, but getting less and less of a moonshot as the science has proven, is ammonia for burning in power plants.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of burning natural gas that makes a CO2 as byproduct, they've found a way to burn ammonia, liquid ammonia, and reach the same temperatures and use it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And ammonia is created in a lab with CO2, and then you can get CO2 back out. And then the ammonia itself, when it's burned, only has hydrogen as a byproduct.
Really?
So it's way, way, way cleaner.
Yeah.
And in the process of making it, all the CO2 is accounted for because you're in a vacuum, basically. So
you're in a lab,
all
right?
the waste can be put back into CO2 pipelines and into the ground like we're doing, or can be used to make plastics or whatever the long-term CO2 solution
Storage plan is. Yeah.
And then we can use that liquid ammonia to have the cargo ships or places that need a very energy-dense fuel source, a liquid that can be burned without CO2.
I'm still shocked that cargo ships are not nuclear powered.
I
mean, if anyone, it's funny, everyone is upset of, the average consumer or protester, they're going like, why does a person need a Hummer or a truck? I'm like, that is nothing compared to the cost of getting your goods from China, because those
cargo ships, they don't burn just normal diesel.
Oh no,
they burn something even worse. It's like liquid coal, basically.
And the engines are like, in terms of, I guess, for folks that don't know what a traditional internal combustion engine is, you got cylinders where you have a tube and the piston goes up and down. Just that one piston is bigger than a person on those giant ships.
I know Japan is investing heavily in ammonia.
Oh, really?
And they want to be, I think they're the ones that want to be the whole
self-sustaining, or
net negative CO2 by like 2030 or 2035.
Yeah.
And when Fukushima happened and they turned off all their nuclear power plants, the only way they were going to get there is through figuring out the ammonia power plant. So they've been investing really heavily and have a few deals that we've made public in the past at Denbury.
Oh, really?
That they want to set up ammonia plants in the Gulf Coast in like Louisiana and Mississippi to make it, and then put it on cargo ships, take it back, because I guess they can't get the environmental regulation to do it in Japan.
Yeah.
But here we're like, hey, you can you can make anything you want in the Gulf of Mexico. We don't care. It's the garbage pit of the oceans anyway.
I forget the acronym. There's an acronym that's like not in my backyard.
Yeah, NIMBY.
Yeah, thank you. It's just hilariously hypocritical.
Yeah.
Just there's a lot of policy where it's like, we shouldn't drill in the oil in the U.S. Let's just buy from Venezuela. Okay.
And I think one of the other reasons that they wanted to do it in America is because of that CO2 byproduct. They don't have a way to handle.
They can't store it
millions,
properly. Yeah. Oh, I
all
see
the
what you're saying.
millions of tons of CO2. But here,
We got all those pockets, right?
yeah, and we've got our CO2 pipeline running from Mississippi to Houston.
Oh, really?
Right through that whole industrial corridor. So they can build a plant right there and give us all the CO2.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. It'll be fascinating to see what technological breakthrough comes through in terms of energy consumption, as well as what's going to be next generator, or will we someday reach that mythical, what is it, fusion?
Oh yeah,
cold fusion.
It's always like 10 years away.
Exactly. It's like, what was it? I think it was proven, like it was an experiment that was shown to work one time in Russia. Was it Russia?
Yeah, I think even just recently
they can't
made
replicate
it last the longest possible.
Really?
But it was still more energy put in than came out.
So it was,
it reached like something like 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. It was like hotter than the surface of the sun.
Oh my gosh.
But they were like, hey, now it's an engineering problem. It's no longer a math problem.
Yeah.
It's an engineering. Like once we can make something that can contain this long enough, it will work.
Yeah.
If we're able to. But those are the kind of challenges as a former engineer, and still think of myself as an engineer, I like to think about.
That'd be fascinating. How do you contain all that power? Or what substance or what material either exists or can we create to properly hold it?
I mean, it's a combination of magnetic levitation inside of a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because then there's no heat that can transfer if there's no medium for it to transfer in. But it's just, and they're toying with like using AI to help fluctuate the field to adjust to keep it in the shape. And so it's got like AI machine learning that can react faster than
a human,
so that if it starts to wobble, they can get it back into the center.
Sounds a lot like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So is AI already creeping into the oil industry as well?
Yeah, we have a few HPC clusters to do like reservoir simulation.
Oh, really?
To figure out, how much oil is left, and at what point do you need to get that drill bit at, in this weird shape. What's the best place to come in to get the most oil out, and so you can run these simulations that do fluid dynamics and take into consideration all these things.
So that's a science in and of itself. It's not just sticking a straw into a cup.
Yeah.
So it could be, so conceivably it's more efficient depending on the angle and the location and all that.
And you might have other companies that are hitting that same reservoir from other places. So you have to know how big those drill bits are, or how big the boring of the pipe is, and like account for all of that.
So how does that work in terms of logistics and legality? If you have multiple companies going after the same pool of resources or the same reservoir? Or
yeah, I mean, it usually doesn't happen in a small enough area. Like in traditional, like you wouldn't ever really interfere. But now that it's getting down to the last of the oil, and these are like miles and miles long, you might, at the time in the 50s when they bought the land, they didn't know that they were attached, like underground, that the reservoirs touched. But now with all the seismic mapping and everything, they can see like, oh, actually, this is part of this bigger structure.
So how's that work with the mineral rights? If you have, let's say, just like this piece of paper, you have, I own that pile of land, Bobby owns that pile of land, but the piece of paper is the whole oil
Yeah.
When it's extracted, do the
I think
profits
they
get
just
split?
pay by barrel that they get out, basically. So it's
Do they
fractional.
So do they calculate a percentage of like how much land you own within that reservoir?
I'm not sure, but that's why we have a whole like
Yeah, whole team for
land
that. Yeah,
department.
yeah.
And it's funny, the landmen is what they're called, that figure out the rights, the mineral rights, the percentage of ownerships.
Mhm.
And even if they're female, they're called landmen. And it's funny, they kind of wear it as a badge of honor. They're like, I'm a landman, and their little certificate says landman.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and all those like division orders is one of the departments that like figures out how all of that's divided.
Mm.
So there's a whole accounting / land middle department that figures out
all those
percentages.
crazy complex scenarios. Right?
Yeah.
And then how does it get to the point where there's two businesses after the same well? Because I'm guessing in terms of coordination, you coordinate with the land, or I was about to say landowner, but the landowner, the mineral rights owner. Is it just because those wells are so big, they're going beyond one landowner, maybe? Or,
Yeah.
And then how's that work in terms of like, does the first company get it just pump as fast as possible, or like?
I'm not sure. I know one of the other interesting things is that the I forgot. Oh well.
I've been there, trust me. And what do you like to do outside the office?
Well, before COVID and before we had our little son, he's 14 and a half months old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Time flies.
We used to travel a lot. We would do 2 or 3 international vacations a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think when we got married, we were trying to figure out like how many countries we had been together.
Yeah.
Been to even before we got married. And it was like 13 or 14. And since then we added like another 9 or 10. So I think we're like in the 20s.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to say, or hard to pick, but what's the best country you visited outside the U.S.?
For me, it was Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was the one place that was so different from anywhere else on Earth that it felt like you were on a different planet almost.
Yeah.
But in like a really cool, like this is what travel is supposed to feel like.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of sad when you go to, Western Europe and everything's kind of like
The same.
Yeah, like London is basically New York.
Really?
It's like, okay, some of the food's a little different, but they all speak English.
Yeah.
Everything's older. That's pretty cool.
Architecturally.
But culturally, they're too similar. Like you see the same movie posters.
What?
The same movies are coming out at the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the rose-tinted glasses of my thought of Europe growing up as a kid. Like I would have thought if you go to like England, or you see all like boutique, small movies, but they have the same blockbusters as the U.S.
Yeah, especially with the consolidation of Disney owns everything.
Everything that makes kids happy, basically.
Yeah. And then other than that, I like craft beer a lot. I got into that. It was funny. I never liked beer until I was probably 25, 26.
Oh, really?
And then I started like, okay, maybe, I'll do a Miller Lite every now and then if that's the only thing they have, or Shiner.
Yeah.
And then I found Blue Moon. I was like, oh, this is cool. There's a little orange on it.
Exactly. Good marketing.
And you can't see through it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then some like British beers like Newcastle.
Oh, yeah. My dad likes that.
I liked how roasty it tasted. It's like, oh, this kind of tastes like pecans.
Yeah.
They don't have pecans in it. Like, this is just how the process is. And then that got me into like, thinking about, oh, there's a brewery down the street. Let me go check it out.
Yeah.
Or the bourbon barrel stouts. That's really where I went over the edge, is like, okay, a bourbon barrel stout that's like 12 or 13%. It's almost like wine.
Really? So what's that for folks not in the industry?
A stout is like a Guinness, but Guinness is only 5% ABV, so it's pretty light and it kind of tastes watery.
Yeah.
But think of it like even thicker, richer, deeper, smokier, and not smokier like an ashtray smoke or like a scotch, but like the malts are roasted.
Really?
And that's why it's so dark, is that they break open the malts and toast them before they do all the brewing process. And so all that caramelization of the toastiness makes it into the beer, and it tastes take those strong stouts that are already like 9 or 10% and put them in emptied bourbon barrels for 6 months or a year,
Really?
and
Beer?
it like pull in some more oakiness and bourbon flavors into it.
Really?
And it just tastes like a more palatable. Like, I'm actually into bourbons now, and I like drinking the bourbons.
What's your favorite one?
Wild Turkey 101
Classic.
and like Rare Breed.
I haven't tried that one yet.
Rare Breed.
Where are they from?
Really good. It's Wild Turkey, but it's their like.
Oh, is there higher end?
Higher end, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then I mean, if I'm on like a flight that has like Woodford, I like Woodford, and Old Forester is pretty good.
You fan of Maker's Mark? Have you ever tried that one out?
Yeah, I'm not that big of a fan.
No.
I like rye.
Oh, okay.
So spicier.
Mm-hmm.
There's an Old Forester rye that's pretty good, Sagamore rye. But that was kind of my gateway to that, was the bourbon barrel stouts, and like the stronger they are and the more bourbon flavor they are. I started to like pick up and like, hey, this other flavor that's not beer is pretty good, and some of them are better than others.
Oh, yeah.
Before that, like the straight liquor, I was like, oh, it burns. I can't taste anything.
Yeah.
But as you start appreciating the nuances, then you're like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, you slowly pick up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to be an old fashioned. That's probably one of the things I've learned to appreciate more as the older I get.
Yeah, I love old fashions. I don't like them too sweet, and a lot of places put a lot of like simple syrup. Or
Yeah.
They put 2 or 3 little sugar cubes instead of 1. I'm like, oh no.
I usually have to check or ask them, like, how much are you adding to it? You know, just needs a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Just like salt. I mean,
have you been to Fogo de Chao or Fogo
Oh,
de
yeah.
Chao? They have a smoked or roasted pineapple old fashioned.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't tried that one yet.
Yeah, because those Brazilian steakhouses, they'll have the roasted pineapple that has like cinnamon and stuff, and they carve it off, and that's kind of the dessert.
Yeah.
They'll use a slice of that in making the old fashioned, and it's so good.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I know my favorite spot locally to get old fashioned lately has been Haywire over in the shops. They have a really good old fashioned.
Okay, I'll have to try it.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things.
Have you ever ordered one that you didn't know was like smoked, and they like come over with the glass cloche and they open it up?
Yeah.
And smoke them? It's like way more of a performance that I'm bargaining for. Most of the time.
It's a lot of bartend. Oh, a big part of liquor industry is advertising, marketing, and accoutrements to the actual presentation of the product. Although what was it? I think not Shakertons. The pepper smash.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite things when I first moved to Texas was their smoked Jack Daniels or smoked whiskey mix, where they had the little apparatus or little mason jar where you have, the ice, the whiskey, and they would pump in this little puffer of smoke. And it was one of the most delicious drinks I ever had.
And they do one with like a Dr. Pepper.
That's what it is, the smoked Dr. Pepper. And it
Yeah.
used to be back in when they saw the contract, it used to be made in Dublin at the Dublin plant back when Dr. Pepper, generations ago was first bottled over there.
Yeah.
And it was in that cute little bottle made with pure cane sugar, which to me it always tastes infinitely better than corn syrup personally.
I didn't like how Dr. Pepper said they could no longer use their name and had to sever all ties.
That's heartbreaking. I don't know. I wonder if that was because of the new parent company, Keurig, because I thought it happened somewhat because that was a big acquisition. But yeah, that bottling plant, they still make some. I mean, if you go, I was in the stockyards, giving my family a tour of it in Fort Worth, and they have a couple of those boutique soda shops, and it's all Dublin. Like they have all the Dublin sodas, and they taste great. But yeah, now they're going for outrageous money on eBay. But like the cute little bottle where it's not too much, because I think it was an 8 ounce bottle. Pure cane sugar, Dr. Pepper. Like when I first moved to Texas, that was like one of the first things I did because my uncle, he's lived in Houston for most of his life. When he would come visit us at Christmas stuff, he would tell us about the allure and the mystery of the real Dr. Pepper.
And you used to have to drive down there to
because
there's only that city. Because I guess because they were breaking the recipe, basically, they couldn't distribute it.
I forgot. So I actually got real deep on this because I love business philosophy and business just history. And from one of the articles was saying one of the limitations used to be, because a lot of folks don't know, like a business like Dr. Pepper, Coke, Pepsi, they own the rights to the formula and everything, but they use bottlers to actually produce the product. So they'll usually sometimes ship them the syrup, and then they'll add things.
Mm-hmm.
So what I read one time about the Dublin relationship with the Dublin bottling plant and Dr. Pepper was they can produce as much as they want, but they couldn't ship out within, I think it was like 350 miles. There was some funny calculation where that was the amount that a horse-drawn carriage can make within a day. It was really bizarre. Yeah. And like they had that thing where, okay, you could do this, but you cannot export it beyond that. So, people would drive in all over the country because that old clause was like still in the contract. Like, all right, we're allowing you to produce a product. You use the name, but you can't ship it to like Iowa or all these other places because we don't want it to.
Yeah, you couldn't even get it in Dallas.
No, it was such a rare boutique item and it's such an allure. And even though Dr. Pepper eventually came out with a sugar or a pure cane sugar, it didn't. And I'm not a fan of the new design bottles. I think they're 12 to 16 ounces, and just that cute little bottle. That was such a brilliant idea.
Well, it's like the Mexican Coke and the Mexican Fantas that you can get places.
Yeah, with the
pure cane sugar
with real glass bottles too. That's one of those things where I think and then it does the same thing with Pepsi too.
Yeah,
I don't know. Most things taste better out of a bottle. I don't know why. There's probably maybe a science behind it, but gosh darn, it's hard to beat a real Coke or real Pepsi in a glass bottle on a hot summer day.
Well, and that's the curse of like being into craft beer is that when someone like I'll order a beer and they'll just bring me the bottle or the can, put it on the table, and I'm like, no, I gotta put it in a glass.
Oh yeah.
the head on top, you gotta like smell it, and like that's half of the taste is the smell,
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what I love hobby. Depending on who you ask, it may or may not be a hobby, but I love things like, producing coffee or making your own coffee or cigars where there's a lot of fun in the pageantry and the process of appreciating the whole thing.
And just even like the shapes of the glasses for whiskey and for beer and for wine, like there's different shapes that are like for the different types of drink. It's crazy if you go down that rabbit hole, but it makes it fun. It's something that you can control and that you don't get out at bars a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But you can have control of it.
And in your own environment, it's a lot more fun too. It's like you can control the quality, how much sugar is or isn't being added to it, or there's no mysteries to it, kind of like, hunting and making your own food, you know exactly what's in it. It's like you're in control of the process and you can take your time where it's like, sometimes if you're at a bar, it's all, fast.
Yeah. And then those places that advertise how cold the beer is, like, we serve our beer at 29 degrees. I'm like, well, that's why so you can't taste it.
Yeah.
Well, your mouth isn't made to taste freezing things.
Yeah. Like boiling coffee. It's like, we have the hottest coffee. Why?
Yeah.
We all have an insulated tumbler. We don't have to, you don't have to nuke it because it's going to stay the same temperature for like, 6+ hours or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like we have the technology. We can contain your coffee. I don't want it to be scalding. I want to, personally, I want it to be a little bit room temperature so I can drink that, drink the whole pot.
Yeah, they say as closer to body temperature as it is the most flavor you can taste.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. But I know you got to get going. Thank you so much for coming on the show, bud. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, Topping Talks is also on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your enemies, heck, tell anyone. Just stay safe. Y'all have a great day. Topping Talks.